The Great Gilly Hopkins, Chapter 5, William Earnest and Other Mean Flowers. Agnes Stokes was waiting outside when she started for school the next morning, and Gilly's first impulse was to turn around and go back in the house until Agnes left. But it was too late. Agnes was already waving and yelling to her. Ugh, what a creep. Gilly walked past her quickly without speaking. She could hear Agnes's little scurrying steps behind her, and then there was a dirty hand on her arm. Disgusted, Gilly shook it off. Agnes's hand was gone, but she hooked her chin over Gilly's upper arm, her face twisted up to look Gilly in the face. Her breath smelled. "What are you going to do today?" she asked. "We? Are you kidding?" "You want to fight the boys again? I'll help you." Gilly spun around and brought her nose down close to Agnes's stubby one. When are you going to get it through your ant brain of yours, that I don't want your help?" Agnes withdrew her nose and shook her greasy hair, but to Gilly's annoyance, she clung like a louse knit. A louse knit is like a hair lice. Scurrying beside Gilly 2 or 3 little steps to every one of Gilly's. Though it was hard to ignore her the rest of the way to school, Gilly managed by putting on her celebrity in a parade face. Staring glassy-eyed far into the crowd, blanking out everything within close range. "I just live up the next block from you, you know." Thrillsville. "I'll stop by a few every day, okay?" This little jerk couldn't even figure out that she was being ignored. And just as they reached the schoolyard, Agnes waved a large unwrapped piece of gum before Gilly's nose. "You want some bubble gum?" What the heck? The Queen had used Rumpelstiltskin, hadn't she? Agnes might come in handy someday. The trick was in knowing how to dispose of people when you were through with them, and Gilly had plenty of practice performing that trick. She took the gum without speaking, and Agnes flushed with pleasure. "Hey, you see that kid over there by the fence? The one with the big nose? Yeah, her mother ran away with a sailor last May." "So?" Agnes put her hand up and whispered behind it. "My grandmother says the whole family's nothing but trash." "Oh, yeah?" said Gilly, smacking the gum noisily. What does your grandma say about your family?" Agnes went as stiff as a dried sponge. Who's been telling lies about my family?" Just a lucky guess, Agnes." Well, they're coming back, both of them." Sure they are." "Well, they are, and they'll probably be back here by Christmas." Yeah, okay, I believe you." Huh. Agnes's eyes darted back and forth in their sockets, studying Gilly's expressionless face. "Are you making fun of me, Gilly?" she asked finally. "Oh, I would never do that." Agnes's uncertainty wavered. "Well, I know a lot more stuff," she said. "You know, I know a lot of junk about people around here." "Yeah, I bet you do, sweetheart." Gilly carefully blew a medium-sized bubble, which popped dangerously close to Agnes's greasy, stringy red hair. Agnes let out a sharp little laugh. "Watch it," she said nervously. And the first bell rang. I'll see you at recess, Gilly." Gilly shrugged and headed for Harris, room 6. "Yeah, maybe." Although a part of Gilly's head wanted to get on with her schemes of how to get Mr. Randolph's money, once she crossed that threshold of Harris 6, she forced herself to concentrate on her lessons. She had made up her mind that the first day to pay attention in Miss Harris's class. She wasn't gonna let a bunch of low-class idiots think that they were smarter than she was. It was infuriating to find herself behind in almost every subject, But she knew that the fault lay in Hollywood Gardens Elementary and not in herself. She would work madly until she had not only caught up with everyone, but passed them all. And then she would skid to a total halt and do nothing. That kind of technique drove teachers wild. They took it personally when someone who could obviously run circles around the rest of the class completely refused to play the game. Yep. And in Miss Harris's class, in this case, that was exactly what she was going to do. At lunchtime, Agnes's class had gotten to the cafeteria first, so when Gilly left a line, Agnes was already seated and waved her to come over to her table. Gilly would have preferred to eat alone. Agnes wasn't the most appetizing lunching companion, but since Gilly had decided Agnes might sometime come in handy, she might as well get used to her. She went over and she sat down opposite Agnes, who smiled. She smiled like a cartoon cat across her tray. I get free lunch too, you know. Gilly glared at her. Nobody was supposed to know who got free lunch and who didn't. So much for privacy. The first thing she was going to teach Agnes Stokes was when to keep her big mouth shut. You know, Agnes, it makes me sick just looking at you. Agnes gave her kick dog expression. What you mean? Nothing personal, Agnes. You just make me sick, that's all. Agnes jerked the cafeteria bench closer to the table and started to roll up her dragging shirt sleeves. Agnes, it's nothing personal, Gilly continued. In fact, you probably can't help it. I don't blame you. I'm just not going to put up with it, Agnes. Put up with what? Gilly leaned way across the table and right into Agnes's pink face. Your big mouth. Agnes tilted backwards to get her face out of Gilly's leering one. People were staring at them and they both straightened up, but Gilly kept the leer in place. I ain't got no big mouth, Agnes said quietly. Then keep it shut. We wouldn't want what's left of your brains to trickle out, Agnes. Agnes's mouth flew open and immediately slammed shut. She shrugged and gave an angry little sniff and then began to eat her lunch. And Gilly paused to give a generous smile to the other people at the table. While spreading her napkin delicately on her lap and picking up her milk carton with her pinky curled the way Mrs. Nevins used to do when she picked up her coffee cup. After lunch, she allowed Agnes to follow her around the playground like a stray puppy, and once again Agnes ventured a tentative, "Hey, Gilly." But Gilly spun around with such a frightening look that any further words withered. And when Gilly left school, Agnes fell in behind her without a word. They marched up the hill, Agnes tripping a long double time to keep up with Gilly's exaggerated strides. When they got to Trotter's, Gilly went in, and as she was closing the dirty white picket gate behind her, Agnes touched her arm and halted and handed her a note. It said, "When can I talk?" Gilly smiled benignly. We'll see, Agnes. We'll just see how it goes." Agnes opened her mouth like a starved baby bird, but she didn't give a chirp. Good bird, thought Gilly. Gilly patted the skinny freckled arm and swept up the walk into the house, leaving the open-mouthed fledgling outside the gate. "Is that you, William Earnest, honey?" "Yeah, it's me, Mamie Trotter, baby," squeaked Gilly. From the kitchen, she could hear Trotter's laugh rumbling. "Come on in here and get yourself a snack, Gilly, honey." Gilly was tempted, but she was determined not to yield. She was too smart to be bought with food, no matter how hungry she felt. She stomped up the stairs past the open kitchen door from which came the definite smell of chocolate chip cookies. Oh, double damn you, Mamie Trotter. Later, behind her carefully closed door, Gilly took out the money from the bureau, and then she pulled out the whole drawer and dumped it upside down on the bed. She smoothed out the bills on the drawer bottom, and then took from her pocket the masking tape she had taken care to steal from Miss Harris's desk. And she taped the bills to the bottom of the drawer. And without warning, the door flew open, and Gilly, to cover the money, fell chest down over the drawer. A frog-eyed William Earnest stood on the threshold trying to juggle a small tray which held a plate of cookies and a glass of milk. "What in the devil?" "Trotter," was all the child could manage in the way of an answer. He was rattling the tray so hard that the milk glass was threatening to jump off the tray. "Well, put it down, stupid." W.E.'s eyes searched the room in desperation, and Gilly was beginning to feel like a fool lying chest down on a bureau. She raised herself enough to turn the drawer over, and then she sat up and turned to face him. "Didn't Trotter ever tell you to knock before you bust in a door?" He nodded, eyes wide, tray rattling. She sighed. What a weird little kid. "Okay," she said, reaching out across the narrow space. "Give it here." He shoved it at her and ran blamity blamity blam down the stairs. And Gilly turned that drawer back over to make a table on the bed and put the milk and cookies on it. She shut the door and then sat down cross-legged on the bed and began to eat. "Oh, thank you, Mamie Trotter. Thank you for these delicious cookies. What a delicious smelling plate of cookies. Oh, man. Ha ha ha. Amen," she mocked Mr. Randolph. In the middle of the last cookie, an inspiration came to her. It wasn't Agnes Stokes who she was going to use. Agnes couldn't be trusted between freckles. No, she was going to use William Earnest. Of course, Trotter's little honey baby engaged in a life of crime. She laughed out loud at the pleasure of it all. Baby-faced Teague, the frog-eyed Filcher, wild-eyed William, the goose-brained Godfather. The crime names. The possibilities were unlimited and delectable. The midget of the mafia, the orange reader squeezer. Nope. His crime name would be the Orange Squirt. She jumped up and put the room to order, danced down the stairs, balancing the tray high on one hand, and skipped into the kitchen. Trotter looked up from the table where she was spooning cookie dough onto a baking sheet and gave her the eye. "You feeling good now?" Gilly gave her that 300-watt smile that she had designed especially for melting the hearts of foster parents. "Never better." She spoke the words with just the right musical lilt, and she put her dishes by the sink, started to wash them, but she thought better of it. Trotter might get suspicious if her goodness was overdone. She skated out into the hallway and around the bottom of the stairs, right into the living room where W.E. sat on the floor staring at Sesame Street. She slid down beside him, and when his eyes checked her out sideways, she gave a quiet, sisterly kind of smile and pretended to be enthralled and overjoyed with Big Bird. She said nothing through Sesame Street. She said nothing through Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. She said nothing through the Electric Company. But occasionally she would hum along with one of the songs in a friendly sort of way. Warming up William Earnest. She never failed to smile at him when she caught him sneaking a quick stare in her direction. Her strategy seemed to be succeeding. At any rate, when supper time neared, she said to him, "Hey, do you want to set the table, or do you want to go get Mr. Randolph?" And he answered with hardly a stutter, "Go get Mr. Randolph." So she set the kitchen table, humming under her breath the Sunny Days theme song from Sesame Street. And after supper, she folded an airplane for him from notebook paper. And at her suggestion, he even followed her out on the front porch to fly it. W.E. squinched his little nearsighted eyes together, wrinkled up his stubby nose, drew his arm way back, and pitched the airplane with all his might. "Pow!" he whispered. The plane swooped down off the porch and then suddenly caught an updraft and climbed higher than their heads. It looped and glided smoothly to the grass. He turned shining eyes on her. "Did you see that?" he asked softly. "Did you see that?" "Okay, okay." Gilly ran and picked up the plane. It was the best one she'd ever made. She clambered up on the concrete post that held the porch railing in place, and she raised her arm, and then she thought better of it. "Now, you do it, William Ernest, okay?" She climbed down and gave him a boost. He seemed a little unsteady from the height of the post. And glancing down, apparently he was afraid to be up there, and he was afraid to move his feet. "Look, I'm not going to let you fall, okay?" She put her hands loosely around his ankles, and she could feel him relaxing under her fingers. He reared back and shot. "Pow!" He said this time a little louder than before, sending the white aircraft with its pale blue lines as high, well, almost as high as the house, looping and climbing and gliding and resting at last in the azalea bushes in Mr. Randolph's yard. William Ernest scrambled off the post and down the steps. He was slowed by the fence, but not stopped. You could tell he had never climbed a fence in his life, and it would have been faster by far to go through the gate and around, but he had chosen the most direct route, over the fence, to his precious plane. He fell in Mr. Randolph's yard in such a way that one arm and leg seemed to arrive before the other pair, but he picked himself up, and at once he delicately plucked his prize from the bushes. He turned around to grin shyly at Gilly, and then, as though carrying the crown of England, came down Mr. Randolph's walkway, the sidewalk, and then into Trotter's gate. About halfway up the walk, he said something. "What'd you say?" Gilly asked. I say," the veins on his neck stuck out with the effort of raising his voice to a level that could be heard. "I said, it sure fly good." He wasn't as dumb as he looked now, was he? Thought Gilly, smiling without taking time to calculate which of her smiles to put on. "Yeah, you throw good, Williamie." I do?" "Sure, I was just admiring your style. Looks like you've had lessons throwing paper airplanes." He cocked his head in puzzlement. "No? You taught yourself how to do that?" He nodded his head solemnly. "Gee, man, Williamie, you're a natural. I've never seen such a natural with a paper airplane." He straightened his thin shoulders and marched up the stairs as though he were the President of the United States. They were still flying the plane, or rather, W.E. was flying it, with Gilly looking on and making admiring remarks from time to time, when Trotter and Mr. Randolph came out on the porch. You got to see this, Trotter. William Ernest, he does this really good." W.E. climbed unassisted to the top of the concrete post. He didn't need Gilly's hands or help now. "Watch," he said. "Watch here." Mr. Randolph lifted his sightless face upward as if he was watching. What is it, son?" "Oh, looks like Gilly made him a paper airplane, looks like," interpreted Trotter. "Oh, I see. Watch now." "We're watching, William Ernest, honey." W.E. leaned back and he let that fly. Pow! For another swooping, soaring, slowly spiraling, skimming superflight. Oh, I love how she uses alliteration. Trotter sighed as the plane gracefully landed by the curb, and William Ernest rushed to retrieve it. "Oh, how was it?" Mr. Randolph asked. "Well, I do declare, Mr. Randolph, sometimes it's a pity that you gotta miss seeing things. I never thought paper airplanes was for anything but to drive teachers crazy." She turned to Gilly. "Gilly, honey, that was really something." Gilly could feel herself blushing, but W.E. came back up the steps and saved her. It's 'cause I fly it so good," he said. "Yeah," said Gilly, patting his shoulder. "You sure do, W.E." He looked up into her face, his squinty little eyes full of pure pleasure. "Gilly, thank you," said Trotter softly, and for a moment Gilly looked at her, and then quickly turned away as a person turns from bright sunlight. You want me to walk Mr. Randolph home? She asked. Oh, thank you, Miss Gilly. I sure would appreciate that so much. She took his elbow and guided him carefully down the stairs, taking care not to look back over her shoulders, because that look on Charter's face, that look, the one that deep down inside of her, the look that Gilly had longed to see all her life, from her mother, not from Trotter. No, this wasn't part of the plan.